Yeah, I'm ready. I was born
Hey,
ready.
that's it. We are live.
Hey, everybody.
Live with all the finger points, pointing the fingers.
Stop pointing at me. I feel so,
You know how you remember how your teachers would tell you that you never walk around with like, oh gosh, I'm hearing myself. You never walk around having a calculator in your pocket, and you're like, I showed you. My mom used to say stuff like, you shouldn't point at people, and I'm like, that's how I start all my content today. Is I just point at people all the time. I've got a calculator in my pocket, and
pointing. The polite way to do it is thumbing.
I thumb you with both of my thumbs at the same time. That's who I am. Like, I don't even care. Like a madman, just thumbing people.
Everybody, look. I'm going to start the podcast, and it's going to be great. And we're going to get into some content.
How in the world? How did we go 5 years of this show and I've never heard you do a Barack Hussein Obama? Never once.
I don't know, man. We mix things up. We mix it up.
Oh my gosh. The fact that you can do that's wow.
Speaking of Barack Hussein Obama, no, we're not gonna. Did you see the Bernie on Joe Rogan? That was kind of wild.
I didn't see that.
That's another pause.
Did he and Elon Musk smoke a fat blunt? That's all I need to know.
Yeah, no blunts were smoked.
No blunts were harmed in the making of the.
But it was pretty
of the Joe Rogans.
So what does our layout look like on YouTube right now? Are we side by side?
No, do you want to be side by side? It's doing the switchy switch.
It's doing the switch.
Yep. Okay. Switcheroos. Switcherooskies. Joseph Leedy says hi. Hey, Joseph. How are you?
Hey. What's up, Joe? Hey, Joseph's going to be at the MageTalk, which is this coming Saturday in lovely Austin, Texas. If you're looking to go on a hike, we want to invite you to come on that hike. It's going to be great.
You need to say every third
more
word.
Uhs. Yeah. Look, we're going to do a hike.
If you like your hike, you can keep your hike.
Look, if you like your hike, you can keep it. If you want to come on our hike, you can come on our hike too.
Single payer hikes for everybody. That's fantastic.
So that's coming up.
That's so good. Well, you're leading the Mage hike. We have not physically started an episode in 5 episodes. I think that I love the new Mage Talk. I love the new Mage Talk. We don't do it. We don't even try.
Hey, I saw a video. I saw you intruded into my Facebook timeline.
Oh, yeah?
Very, very rude,
search,
by the way, with a paid ad. All of a sudden, I'm seeing an ad of your face in the Facebook timeline of your future commerce, which is pretty cool.
Thanks. I'm learning from you. I've always said that you're 18 months late to things. I'm 18 months late on the Kaylin Jordan content creation train.
You've been taking your time on that. You've been taking.
Oh my gosh, taking my sweet time.
Yeah, but it's pretty good.
Thank you.
You went to a thing. You went to a conference with what was it? What was it you went to?
Commerce Next.
Yeah. Commerce Next.
Super interesting show. So there's it was founded by 3 people, and I don't want to get their names wrong. So I shall Google the names as I go. So Scott Silverman is sort of a smart guy who's been around the NRF world for a long time. Alan Dick, who I worked with when I did a panel at the NRF Innovation Stage this past year in January, and Victoria Sonsev Veronica Sonsev, and she's from Chameleon Collective, which is a creative consultancy, and a digital and retail consultancy strategy group. Super interesting that 3 people from different areas of the ecosystem came together and made a really small conference that's for big brands, and then this year they added in direct to consumer brands, and I moderated a panel. And the reason I intruded into your Facebook page is a tactic.
Did you run an ad targeted just directly? Because you can do that. You can.
Yes.
You can target it just.
So that's what I did.
Just to me. Okay, good.
No, I mean, not just to you, but what I did was I saw this interesting anecdote by somebody on Twitter. It was in a Twitter thread about they went to hire somebody or they interviewed somebody, and then that person, when they got home, made a LinkedIn targeted campaign of a custom audience just for that person. And it was a video of them saying, "Hey, thank you so much for interviewing me." And it was
that's cool.
Digital marketing role, which I think is just the smartest thing in the whole world.
That's smart. Yeah. That's
so it's like just one-to-one, personalized marketing. And I think that we want to experiment with that a little bit. And so that's why I did that with Future Commerce, just to try it. We're experimenting with video. But anyway, I was at that show, and that's where the Twitter thread that the name of this particular episode of MageTalk comes from.
The famous Twitter thread. Yes, indeed. So you posted a tweet. You were like, yeah, so I was at this conference called, I was at hashtag CN19.
Commerce Next, yeah.
And I learned that everyone hates their e-commerce platform. They're too limited, too flexible, too expensive, too free, too big, or too small. Everyone I talk to wants to migrate from an incumbent platform. And then a thread ensued, which is really interesting. I thought it was like, I feel like you're, and this tweet kind of demonstrates, like, I feel like you're going beyond like just being like Magento centric to where you'll say something like I forgot exactly what you said, but you'll say like, you'll talk very frankly about things like this. And it's not in like a criticizing Magento way. I think you're coming at it from a good perspective where you're going beyond just being very platform centric to really understanding like the mindset of what the retailer cares about, what the consumer cares about. And I find it quite refreshing. So yeah, no, I really do. It's good. Yeah.
I find it refreshing to know that the conversations that I have where people are frustrated with things that happen like in their e-commerce platform, which, many times when I'm talking to somebody, it is Magento. It's refreshing to me to hear that other people have pains. They're not the same pains, but they also have pain. And that means that we're all just doing things that are really hard, and they're really hard problems to solve, and different platforms solve different things better than others. Right. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't mean that it's not like Magento is the only platform where retailers can be frustrated. There's a lot of frustration in a lot of platforms, which means to me that I think it's a sign of sort of a healthy ecosystem of sort of the pace of the desire for innovation and execution from a merchant is at a pace that the technology platforms can't keep up with it. And that I think is very healthy, because that's the kind of thing that will spur innovation eventually, because it's do or die. They'll leave you if you don't innovate. And some people in that thread were saying things like, stop messing with the platform and just let smart people innovate, and let your developers go, let them innovate. And that's the sign of a healthy ecosystem. And other people are saying it needs to be totally closed wall. Like, go the BigCommerce and Shopify route, where it's not an open core, and just, with boundaries you can thrive, because you'll learn to play within the box, and you can't do anything outside of the box. A lot of people waste time doing a lot of things that are outside the box because they can and they shouldn't. I find those conversations really interesting, but
the ecosystem point made me think of something. I was watching an interview with Jack Ma this week, the CEO of Alibaba, which is the Amazon of China. And he was talking about some of the differences between Alibaba and Amazon. And he actually the ecosystem was pretty much the big difference in that, Amazon is sort of, like you talk about a closed wall, and Amazon isn't a closed wall. I mean, there's Amazon sellers, but Amazon is integrating vertically across, across in a bunch of different ways, right? They're going to start to do shipping, right? They're doing their white label brands, like they're taking everything over and they're doing a really good job of it objectively. But Amazon's getting a lot of pushback. I mean, you look, without getting too much into politics and stuff like that, people are like, hey, Amazon's not paying a lot of taxes. Like,
yep.
There's a view that like they're taking, Andrew Yang talks about. Do you follow Andrew Yang? I promise we're not going to talk about politics.
Too late. He opened the show with the Barack Hussein Obama.
But he talks about how they've taken 30%. They've pretty much closed 30% of retail stores. Somebody fact check me on that. But point is, they're sort of coming in and taking over. And anyway, Jack Ma talked about how they view their role as empowering their ecosystem. So doing less of owning the entire stack and more about empowering people that are on their marketplace. So a little bit of a tangent from what you're talking about, but I think that's an interesting perspective. And obviously we can look at some of the differences in how Magento's ecosystem works, Shopify's ecosystem. How are those different ecosystems working? How healthy are they?
Do you mind if we jump into like some of the hard questions there? Because the thing that people immediately kind of started asking in that whole Twitter thread earlier this week was, well, Jesse from Classy Llama, Jesse Tyler, if you don't know him, super smart guy, was sort of prodding at what would your advice be to each of the platforms, or what would your advice be on like why Shopify or why Magento or what pain or what. And I think that, and I'll get back to your Jack Ma point here in a second. They all suffer from different types of like strengths and weaknesses, where Magento had a large portion of the market and has been around for 10 or 11 years. And I don't know that a lot of Magento ecosystem people realize that Magento is seen as legacy. Mm-hmm. Right? Like at some point there was a crossing, like a tipping point. We crossed over into a period where, whether it's true or not, right? Whether it's true or not, Mark Lavelle was, talking for a couple of years ago. It was right around the time that Hill House made their investment into Magento shortly after the Premier acquisition. But right around that time, Mark kind of went on this rant for a little while about, we have the youngest code base in the entire ecosystem. With that they have, because Magento 2 was new at the time, it was like, we have the youngest code base in the ecosystem. ATG is ancient, right? They were positioning themselves as the newest. But in actuality, Magento as a brand is seen, and there are portions of Magento, dark corners of Magento, as you've seen on Twitter this week. The persistent customer, persistent login session has legacy behind it. And it has vestiges of the old platform still there from Magento 1. So it is a generation or an evolution of the platform. So there are portions of Magento that are legacy, and Magento is considered to be legacy. It's seen as legacy. And because of that, Magento is installed software, right? You used to download and install software, but that's not really how people think of e-commerce anymore. When they want to get e-commerce, they think of a service. They don't think of, I need to buy software and then install it on a machine and run it. And you don't even think of CDNs that way. Like, that's a service that you contract. It's not like a lot of the things that we do in this world are services. Email, you wouldn't buy email, unless it's an Adobe product. God forbid that you don't want to throw any shade at Adobe, but there are versions of Adobe Campaign that you download and put on a server. Like,
I'm sure it works great.
It's 2019, y'all. Like, email is a service now. And I think e-commerce is being seen in most people's minds of transitioning to be a service. And so that was my advice, was that Magento just has to go all in on cloud. And then, you know what? I started catching a lot of crap from a lot of hosting vendors saying, well, are you saying that blah, blah, everyone's hating on Magento now because, hosting vendors should just give up and give in to Magento Cloud. And I'm like, this isn't anyone's doing. This is the expectation of the customer. So if you want to be mad at someone, be mad at the customer, because the customer who's buying into Magento has that expectation of Magento. It's not your fault. It's not my fault. It's not Magento's fault. It's not anyone's fault. Just in the same way that I go shopping, at Zoomies and I expect to have a product in 2 days and I don't get it for 2 weeks and I'm mad. I'll keep ranting on this, by the way. Because that's not Zoomies fault as much as it is Amazon's fault, because they gave me the expectation.
Is this now the third episode where we've talked about your Zoomies?
Yeah, because I'm mad. 2 weeks. It shouldn't take, he could have literally made new shoes and walked them to my house. But that's the point that I'm making, is that it's a customer expectation now that you're cloud first. And Magento can say they're cloud first, but so much of the problems that we have in the ecosystem, especially MageCart, especially those, are around the installed software. Mm-hmm. And retailers' inability to secure and manage and run Magento well. Mm-hmm. And that's not a host's problem. That's it's a factor of a retailer doesn't know how to be a technology company. Mm-hmm. And anyway,
no, it's a fair point. I mean, I was thinking about that because obviously we know in a lot of hosting companies, and when you say, hey, Magento should just be cloud, the obvious follow-up to that is, well, what about the hosting companies? And when you take a step back sort of from first principles and look at it, the company with any kind of a software product, and most of the time when you have an enterprise software product that can be deployed or hosted, it's the company, the first party, that will do the hosting for you. That'll do the hosting.
Sure.
That's the model. It's if you want us to host it for you, pay us this tier, and if not, here's the other tier. So from kind of first principles, it does make sense that the first party should be the one that's offering the you're smiling at it. Anyway, should be the one that's offering the cloud option. And so I think it goes back to we did see a lot of issues with Magento Cloud in the past. Obviously, you have a lot of exposure to it day to day, and you've seen a lot of improvement over the past, I guess, year or two.
Yeah. So, is this a good time to mention that MageMojo is our sponsor, and we're very happy and very thrilled to have MageMojo entering our third year of partnership with the MageMojo team, and we love them. If you're looking for a Magento host, and you are still doing that deployed software, model because it's 2019, and why not? Then you better go with the most secure and fastest way of hosting it. And I did say that on the record. You probably want to go to the Mojos. So check out Stratus, Mojo Stratus. Yeah.
Check it out. And but the truth is that MageMojo has done a lot of
what are you doing right now?
I'm seeing a car pulling up outside my house. Has done a lot of breaking the fourth wall here. Has done a lot of innovation around. I mean, you talk about security, and MageMojo has done some interesting stuff around proactively scanning, sites for security issues. I think they're collaborating with Magento themselves on those things. So. At the end of the day, it is a question of innovation in the sense that if Magento does a good job with their cloud offering and prices it well and all that kind of thing, then it's going to be hard to compete against that. Historically, this has been an area where the community has come in and has filled a niche that wasn't being executed as well as it could. So. But for example, you mentioned email. I mean, Magento had an email automation feature in their enterprise product. It's probably still in there somewhere.
Oh, it is.
And most people don't use that. And like you said, most people use some kind of a SaaS email service, right? But if you take a step back and go, okay, let's look at hosting versus email. And it's kind of obvious that you're not going to use their email functionality. But hosting, it's in a different category as far as what would make sense for the first party to be supporting, right?
Right. Yes. I think you're drawing a really great distinction there in that you don't need email to conduct business online. It's a multiplier, but it is not a requirement. Right?
Okay.
Is that right? I'm just taking baby steps, right? Right. But it is a requirement to have a hosting environment. Like you have to have somewhere to put the code on the internet for people to interact with your company.
True. Right. Yeah.
Right.
True.
Right. So it wouldn't be seen as encroachment that Magento has the ability to send newsletters poorly, by the way. It's not encroachment that Magento is in that space. Until, I don't know. I'm so fatigued actually about that particular point, but
why are you fatigued?
Because my ads have been blowing up for 3 solid days on this.
You took a bold step. This is what I really like about, and you referenced this tweet, but you said Magento has incumbency problems in that they're slow to innovate. They aren't just one thing: cloud, starter, Adobe Cloud, on-prem, open source, enterprise, version 1, version 2, version 2.3, PWA. And PWA has been coming since announced at Magento Live UK 2017. It's slower to build on and more expensive to maintain. And at the same time, right, because that's critical to Magento. And then at the same time, you say, listen, Magento should go all in on cloud. They're doing a great job with cloud. So I feel like you're really being honest about something that's hard to talk about.
Yeah.
And doing a great job of walking that line, man. So I really like this kind of stuff where,
oh, thanks.
I think in the past, maybe you'd be more likely to kind of toe a line, to be totally honest. And I feel like you're transcending beyond that to where you're not really, you're just, you're being honest and clear about what you're seeing and what makes sense for customers and for retailers and stuff like that. So,
yeah, I think about the pain that I'm willing to endure, right? And it's because, I'm sort of flexing entrepreneurship muscle, which is something that you're very familiar with. You have built everything that you built, Mage Mail, Commerce Hero, Mage Update is the most famous one, I'm sure. Look, he's flexing his entrepreneurship. Show title. So everything you built from the ground up, and you started with a blank page one day, right? You started with hex FFFFFF, right? You're nothing. And
I feel like you're giving an obligatory compliment back because I gave you a compliment.
No, thank you. No, I'm trying to appeal to the fact that you've built it. Now, when I'm faced with building something, there's only so much pain I'm willing to endure to build something. And even building a WordPress site can be painful. So when I think about what retailers have to undergo to do simple things in a Magento context, in a server rendered paradigm that is a vestige of an older age of the internet, the way that we render things and deliver them to customers is from an older era. In fact, even the Magento 2 way of accomplishing that with UI components is kind of a hallmark of an era. We do things differently nowadays. And to build simple things in that ecosystem can be much more painful than if we had PWA. Mm-hmm. With PWA, it's so much easier to develop at a rapid pace. It's so much cleaner. It's easier to innovate. And I'm starting for the first time to experience it for myself, rather than saying that this is the state of the way that the world is and get with the program. I'm actually experiencing for myself. So the change of mind or the change of perspective is really just coming from being in the shoes of trying to launch something like a brand as Future Commerce and trying to do something bigger with that, and saying, I need to build out all these things. Why don't we have an event calendar? Oh, I can't do that because I'm on Simplecast, right? Why don't we have a a blog. Well, I can't do that because my platform doesn't allow me to. I'm starting to understand that context of what it's like to be a retailer on a platform that can't allow me to innovate. And I'm trying to empathize with where they are. That's all.
Right. Yeah. Like on the flip, when you're on the flip side of it, where you're helping people build stuff, you're like, hey, here's what we could build. You want option A, B, or C. And if you don't have the money for it, or if you think it's too expensive for us to build the thing that you need us to build, that's your problem. Like, why you got to get with the program.
Right. Yeah. This is the reality. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the reality. And then now you're seeing the other side of it, where you're the business owner, the innovator, and you're like, hey, let's do this, and this, because you can see where the business needs to go. And it's like, oh, well, we can't because of this and that and this and that and this and that. You're like, I don't want to hear those. They just give me a SaaS app I can just plug into and get this thing going. You know?
All right. Karen. Hi, Karen. Karen's in the comments. She said they focused on design patterns over developer usability and the retailer, and that's the underlying issue. I fully agree, which is you might want to clip that out to say that I agreed with Karen fully, and share it everywhere. Cause,
that is an historic look. Yeah. We have got an historic moment. Philip has agreed completely and fully without reservation with Karen. And
she says we always agree. She said this like so many times. She says we always agree. We just say things differently. I feel like if that's the case, then we are always in violent agreement with each other.
Violent agreement.
We're both loudly agreeing at each other.
Way, shout out to Karen. She put the MageTalk on the Magento Austin meetup group, so it's officially on the.
It's officially official. We love Karen Baker. Thank you, Karen, for always supporting what we've done. And I do talk in American.
I'm not going to find it fast enough, but I remember seeing on the Twitters that there is an Austin meetup. Maybe she'll mention it in the comments. I think there's a meetup coming up in the next week or so.
Yeah. One thing that Karen had said about, focusing on design patterns was, I think and this is like, again, we tend to, this is one of the things I was criticizing, and I'm guilty of it. I'm most guilty of it because you and I have a platform for me to be publicly guilty of it every week. But we are very enamored with our past in the Magento world. Like oral history and our roots defines us. Like other than Toby in the Shopify ecosystem, who is talking about what Shopify did 5 years ago? Nobody cares. Like they're all talking about right now. And for some reason, in the Magento ecosystem, and maybe it's because the circles we run in, it's nostalgic. We all had a coming of age. We are all building something. Like careers were built, businesses were built,
relationships were formed.
Right. And maybe those things are personal to us. So Magento is personal to us. But like, I think that in some way, like those are good things. All of those things are good things. But any strength overextended, I think, can become a weakness, and we can become very inwardly focused. Mm-hmm. And I think that the design pattern over developer usability, I've said this before, is a vestige of the way that we did open source 5 years ago. And the way that we did that before was we don't have a means of contributing from the outside world into the core. We don't have community engineering. So what we do is we have an open channel on Twitter of people that we know who are good stewards of the brand. And we're going to get 40 of them in a room, and we're going to ask them hard questions, and we're going to make decisions together of how the future of the platform will evolve. And unfortunately for us, every one of those people were developers. And unfortunately for us, every one of those people were into certain fads at the time. And a bunch of decisions were made that locked Magento into a certain era and made us all sort of have to sort of continue to live under those decisions. We can change that now because we can contribute broadly from the outside ecosystem. But for the last few years of Magento 2, we've been sort of fixed. We're at this fixed point in time trying to innovate. And we've got 4 streams now, unfortunately, to do it in. We've got cloud, on-prem, M2, open source, commerce. It's just,
It's almost like one of the strength of a strong community is that a strong community and a developer ecosystem is that in those early days, the developer, I mean, we talked about how when I believe it was when the Google canonical tag came out, the very next day there was an extension that was live. It was some, right. Like we talk about how the community has come in and filled gaps, and that's been the strength of the Magento community, is that developer ecosystem and the strength of relationships in the community, but possibly. One of the downsides, as you're saying, is that there can be, if that momentum is going in the right direction and is aligning with the needs of the platform and the needs of the end users, right? Back in the day, merchants getting on Magento, needing 7 different plugins, boom, 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 everything was great. These days, like everything's moving to SaaS. So there's less of a need for that indie developer, as sad as that is, right? And like, so maybe the downside of that strong community is that, you know, that the inertia maybe takes you in another direction, right? Like that inertia that was so positive early on is maybe going in this other direction now, where we're so focused on these design patterns and stuff like that, instead of looking a little more closely at like, hey, what does a merchant actually care about 2019? And that's a really interesting way of putting it, of like, nobody cares about what happened 5 years ago in these other, nobody cares about who was the CEO. Nobody cares about what did the ex-CTO do and start somewhere else and talk about benchmark. Nobody cares, right? Like although it's possible that within these other ecosystems and communities, they have their own inside baseball stuff.
Oh, sure. I'm sure that's true.
But I think there's something there. I think there's something there to that.
And these are two people's opinions, right? Like I have an opinion, and it's no more important than anybody else's opinion. I'm just sharing that to you know, through the only megaphone I have, which is, you know, Twitter. I'm sharing that the thing that I've learned this week is we're not the only ones with pain in trying to innovate. And people that are on Shopify express that they're in pain too. And they're, in many cases, it's just a different story. They feel too limited, or they have too many, you know, they have too many apps. Their stores are slow. Their storefronts are slow. It's really, really hard to debug which app is causing a problem. Like, they have problems, but they're different types of problems, you know? And Mark Lewis had mentioned shout out to Mark Lewis and the Natalico team, which now includes Emily Pepperman, who is one of my favorite people and one of our members here. Yeah, she's now on his team, which is awesome. She's been a longtime member of the Magento South Florida meetup. So shout out to Emily Pepperman. Mark Lewis had said on Twitter that, you know, they announce things so far in advance that like you forget about them by the time they actually launch. And that's sort of like the PR-led product innovation is like the train that Shopify's on now. And I loved the way he put it, which is you watch, you know, a 400-pound gorilla coming after you for a year before it actually hits you, you know, and which is an interesting perspective. Something Digital, we're doing a lot of Shopify work right now, and we do platform fitness a lot. Like, we are actively talking to every one of our customers all the time on both the Shopify and Magento sides of the house about the way that they're approaching, the way that they're choosing a platform, because you shouldn't choose a platform by budget, right? You should choose a platform based on what your needs are, and because there's always a way to work to budget. And so we're just trying to do the best by our customers as we can. And that's my perspective, is just like, everybody's got pain. Some pains are different than others.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Yep.
At the top of the doc, I have a book that says, probably not worth discussing, but just in case. It was a post that was critical of Magento Cloud, which I have had several people DM me about this week, but it didn't get I didn't see a lot of public traction from Magento Twitter.
Oh yeah, your DMs were blowing up too?
Yeah, DMs were blowing up. So anyway, we kind of covered I think we sort of covered the meat of it.
Yeah. One last thing though, I'd like to say, which is, when I'm at a Magento conference, we talk a lot about Magento, right? We talk a lot about the technology because that's what we're there for. It's really interesting when I'm at a broad conference that's just a bunch of retailers in a room to hear what they talk about. And the things they talk about are just, they're on a different level. It's not at all about the technology.
The
It's
platform
about
is just a tool.
It's about the people, to be honest with you. It's like, how do we form partnerships and alliances? And one thing that I think really blew my mind at Commerce Next, and I think this is really insightful, is Rent the Runway. I think her name is Maureen Sullivan. Hold on. Maureen Rent the Runway. Maureen Sullivan. She's a COO of Rent the Runway. She sort of opened the show. And one thing she said that I thought was really interesting is their original business strategy was, we are going to rent runway fashion to people. And these are very expensive pieces of clothing, from very prestigious designers. And we're going to take their business model of selling that to rich people and models, and we're going to flip that on its head and rent it fractionally for weeks at a time to normal human beings. And the brands that made those products were offended. They're like, and they refused to partner with Rent the Runway. And Rent the Runway stuck by their guns, and they said, we believe that this is such a valuable thing for both of our businesses that we refuse to go around you and do an end around and buy product from buyers. Instead of, like, if we want Fendi, then we're going to have a relationship with Fendi. And if we're going to have a relationship with Gucci, we're going to have a relationship with Gucci. We're not going to buy it from some other buyer, because we could still have the product, but we want the trust of the brand. And I thought that was really insightful, is that they played the long game, which is to win the trust of the brand. And that's the thing that retailers talk about, is winning trust. And when they talk about lifetime value, they're not talking about the Google Analytics metric. They're talking about literally winning the lifetime value of a customer. I learned at that show that the average order value of a Starbucks order is $3.80, but the lifetime value of a Starbucks customer is $14,000. And every single person that I do business with is just trying to make their quarter. They're only looking at Google Analytics, and everybody's trading off the lifetime affinity, the lifetime value of a customer for whatever the present day metric is. And I think that that's a really interesting, like, somehow, some way, Magento acquired lifetime customers with you and me and Karen and Alan and Joseph and Edward and everyone else idling in the chat right now. Like, they acquired lifetime customers from us. I want us to have those types of conversations in our ecosystem that aren't just about the cool new hip tech and how to debug this and that. We still need all that stuff, but I feel so enriched when I go to a show like that, because it's very people centric and not technology centric. And that's kind of just where my head is right now.
So that's really interesting. But what's the, talk about that Magento has acquired lifetime customers in us, and that in the sense that, we made a podcast called MageTalk, right? And we have an affinity for the Magento brand or for the Magento community. So what's the direct corollary to that situation where the Rent a Runway said, hey, we want to have this relationship with Gucci. We don't want to go around it. We want to know that you actually are in this. Are you talking about, like, how can Magento create that loyalty cement that loyalty with the community?
Oh yeah. 100%.
Technology.
Right. Correct. That's correct. Okay. Right. And I think that Magento has done that. And I think at certain points in its history, it's done it better than others. And some people have been frustrated along the way. My experience is not the same as Karen's. Karen's business depends, Shipper HQ depends on e-commerce platforms that they can integrate with, so that retailers can, buy shipping services from them. And so what Magento's decisions are, Magento makes a decision, it can affect her business very directly. Magento makes a decision, it doesn't affect my business. I just have to play by their rules, right? Like I change my coding practices, or I tell my clients that we have to upgrade you to 2.3.1. And that's the end of the game. I don't have to support 5 concurrent versions of Magento with my plugin. So her pains are different than my pains. And Magento is a very good partner for me, but might be a very bad partner for someone else. I think if we all had that sort of the rent the runway idea of establishing trust for the long term, it means doing things that are self-sacrificial for your present value, or for your present, like your current present opportunity, sacrificing that for the longer term relationship and trust. And that means that, I don't know how Magento goes about doing that. I think Magento is trying to do that, and I feel like their hearts are in the right place, and they are trying very hard. But things like cloud, people keep, I see a lot of people, that call Magento out around cloud. I have a different experience with cloud, but Magento is trying, I think, not to grab market share or disenfranchise their partners. They're trying to respond to what their buyers, their customers of their commercial product are asking for, which is back to the original point that you had made, which is, the first party expectation that Magento makes the software, they should be able to host it too. And I try to think the best of them, and I think that they're trying very desperately to be good partners to everybody, and they don't do a great job all the time. Maybe that's glad handing on my part. Anyway, yeah. I'm just sharing things I learned. I don't know that I have a tidy little bow for everything.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It's on the brand point though. It's interesting. I talked to a buddy who, I don't know, maybe he will share some of this more publicly, but he didn't mention it. So I'll just mention it, is that he's a developer, and he was actually really inspired by Gary Vee's talk at Imagine, talking about building a brand. And he's a Magento developer, and he recently launched a business selling a product related to some stuff. Anyway, maybe we'll get into some of the details, but anyway, he launched essentially an e-commerce business, and is doing ads, doing paid media, getting sales, all that kind of stuff, and was talking about how he's really inspired by the idea of building a brand that your community cares about, being engaged with your community, and how some of the other businesses in that particular niche didn't have the greatest e-commerce experience. They're kind of just selling the product. And so that was really interesting to me. Maybe we'll get him on at some point to talk specifically about.
Is that Oleg?
No.
Okay. All right. So I know someone else who had the exact same story.
Really?
Yeah, exact same story. I think a lot of people in our field are very inspired by that. It's we help people launch brands all the time, right? So yeah. It's sort of a natural thing for us to want to try to do it for ourselves. And I think that entrepreneurship is very important.
Yeah. And with my businesses and stuff, I've always tried to, I've always created something. They've been very small, but I've always created something that is very much my own, and that I care a lot about, and that I is connected to the community that I'm connected to, and I'm responsive to that community. And I think there's a unique value there as well. And so that's something I believe in as well. Real quick, I wanted to mention, I think we talked about Meet Magento New York, which is coming up very soon. And I noticed that my buddy Aaron Sheehan is giving a talk on, I just want to mention this real quick, giving a talk on how to use an RFP process to navigate M1 to M2 migrations. Working title, Don't Fear the RFPer.
Like the Reaper.
Yeah. So I think that'll be good, because Aaron is always been, whenever we talk about things like processes around how to navigate, complex decisions for their, Aaron's a consults with merchants and retailers and stuff, and is really very, very, very smart guy. So I think this is going to be a good talk. So I just wanted to mention that. And if you're not going to Meet Magenta New York, you should check it out. We do not have any coupon codes for you, but
no coupon codes. This is an anti-coupon code event.
Yeah, there are no coupon codes, but you should check it out. The dates. Remember what you said last time about how the dates should always be in the meta?
In the meta, yeah.
Yeah, that would come in so handy right now as I'm a bit of Googling.
So Brent Peterson called us out and said it's been in there since day one. And his theory, or at least the thing that I think he was saying, is his theory is that Magenta or Google suppresses it on purpose to try to get you to click through so that they can really? Get some sort of attribution. Yeah,
that's a wild theory.
Yeah, I think it's. What about BOGO for tickets? Alan said. Alan, that's basically 50% off, my bro. No coupon codes for this event. No coupon codes. I do have it on good authority that there will be a musical performance. Maybe you could sneak in with the singers. So Alan, maybe you should work on that.
Actually, the coupon code thing ties into the brand discussion we're having. I know we joke about it, but it really does, because when you have a strong brand, and I've gotten asked about Meet Magenta New York personally already like 5 times.
Yeah,
there's a lot of excitement around it, and a lot of people that are planning to go, because they go year after year, or they've wanted to go for the first time, and so they don't need that darn coupon code.
Well, yeah, yeah. If you're a premium brand, you don't want to dilute your value by being discounted all the time. You motivate your customer base to rely on the discount, and maybe this is smart. This might be smart. Painful that we have to keep talking about coupon codes, but yeah, it's very smart.
I find it quite enjoyable. It's fun for me to joke about.
I love it. I love not having a coupon code. It makes life so easy.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun to make fun of too. Let's see here. A couple minutes left. Let's see. Do you have anything else? There's this team one-on-ones thing I thought was interesting. I saw a tweet by my buddy Mike Sudik. And it was, if you're leading a team, you should take time to talk casually with your team members one-on-one. It's hard, especially if your team is small and there's lots to do, but it's worth it for them, and they won't ask for it, but a healthy team needs it. I thought it was interesting, and I do get asked from time to time from people about how, what's the best way to structure, reviews, right? Employee reviews, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And I think I saw another tweet on that topic recently, and I've heard from some of the employers that I work with through Commerce Hero that moving that review, I don't know what you guys do, but moving that review from being once a year to being more frequent, I think is important. I think on the spectrum of like reviewiness, right? Like you've got the yearly formal review, right? And then you can do, discussions more on a quarterly basis. And then to the other end of the spectrum is I think is really important is these casual discussions. I was talking with a buddy who has a growing company and was, as the company has grown, there's been layers of management that are added. He said something interesting, which was that previously, if he were to get involved with somebody on a particular issue, on a particular piece of code, it would be a fun thing. It was like, oh, cool. Yeah. Like, we're going to like tag team on this, like, cause he, has a development background and stuff like that.
Yep.
And it's changed from that dynamic to now, if he gets involved with something, it's like, uh-oh, what's the problem? Why is he getting involved? Right. So same exact activity, which is the boss getting involved with a particular developer on a particular thing, has 2 completely different meanings as the company size has grown from like, oh, this is cool, we're going to collaborate with him, and he's fun to work with and really smart, to, oh God, why does the boss want to get involved in this? And I think having, I don't know what you guys do, but having some, casual discussions are so important to just keep like a healthy flow in the team.
I fully agree. So yeah, I could talk about what we do. There's all kinds of things we do. I think it works differently for every single company. I think as roles grow and evolve and you bring people in, you have to sort of rely both as a manager and an owner, from what I've watched at Something Digital, you need to rely on the brilliance of the people that you've hired. And if you've hired the right people, they'll grow and create value wherever they are. And one thing that I've seen is, this is for what it's worth. Greg Steinberg, who founded Something Digital, and his business partner, John Klonsky, of almost 20 years. The two of them, when I first started at the company, Greg was running the team that oversaw delivery, and John was doing business development. And about 4 years ago, after 14 or 15 years of, them being frustrated with each other and how each other were doing their jobs, they switched roles. And 4 years ago, they switched roles to where Greg is doing business development and John is overseeing team delivery. And they were both so convinced that they could do each other's job better than the other that they actually did. And I think that, but as the company grows, and we've had incredible growth the last couple of years, as we've grown, the company has outgrown their ability to oversee every single part of the entire, delivery, and they have to trust the people below them. And I think that's the same sort of scenario that you outlined, which is if Greg were to get down in and start looking at code and like asking people questions about the why they did a certain thing or why they responded to a client on this email that way, or John was, asking why, a director was, not approving something, like if they got into the minutia, it would be seen as interruptive. It would be seen and I think that it's just a natural, that's probably the sign of a healthy company. Yeah. Right. It's a sign of a healthy growing of roles or reversal of roles, and having to trust people in your org is,
it's
great sign.
Last thing I just got to say before we wrap up, that's so funny. You talked about them switching roles, because something I want to say earlier when we were talking about the Magento ecosystem and how you have had more empathy for the business side of the ecosystem as you've switched roles.
Yeah.
And we've talked about before, the developer that's agency side versus the developer that's with a product company or extension company versus somebody that's merchant side. I think it'd be fascinating to have, switch roles for a day type thing once a year, whatever, like where people switched, and it would have to be more than a day. I mean, that's kind of gimmicky, but where you switched roles to another side of the ecosystem, I think that'd be fascinating, because you'd get empathy for that other side, and I think it can't be overstated how powerful that is.
I for one would vote for switching roles with, if you had to be a salesperson for a day and had soul-sucking conversations, over and over, I think you'd have a lot of empathy for people in a sales role.
Yeah, exactly. Or think about hosting companies, support.
That kind of role switching. I like that.
That kind of role. Yeah,
I like that.
Or the person that's on the retail side that's buying products and is, trying to import products into the back end and doesn't care about all the specifics. Anyway, so
I love that.
I believe we're at our time, sir. Thanks everybody for stopping by. Remember to give us a 5-star and thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next week.
Yeah. Peace. Yep. How do we stop this thing? There's a button here somewhere. I'm sure that there's stop live